Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, Africans. I hope you're faring well where you are, and if you ain't faring well, please fare well where you are. They say that if the tree is too strong and the roots are deep, there's no need to fear the wind. This proverb from India teaches us something important. In the same way, a country is like a tree. When the roots are its values, its justice, its fairness, and its truth. When these roots are not strong, of course, the empire will fall. An American white man, he made a video called The United States of Collapse. So he replaced America with the word collapse. He adds the end of empire. So the whole title is The United States of Collapse, the end of an empire. See, this title is like a warning bell. It is telling us that America is facing the wind, and the roots, of course, we know are not deep enough to withstand the current. We want to listen to this speech, why we think that America will fall, or why the gentleman thinks America will fall. And let's try and examine the roots of American values. Are they strong enough to withstand the storm that America is going through right now? Or will America fall as we know? So let's listen to him. I shall get back by the end of the video, of course, where we shall also have a deep critical analysis. Let's dive in.
Have you noticed this feeling in the air? A low-grade tension, like the faint smell of smoke in a building where the fire alarm never quite goes off. Or maybe the subtle smell of rot under the bed perfume. You walk down any major street in the US and you'll see it in the eyes of the people pretending not to notice the growing tent cities pitched under the overpasses. And you'll hear it in the way conversations have basically turned into shouting matches about whose version of the facts are true. You'll taste it in the food that somehow costs twice as much while containing half as much food and even less nutrition. The roads crack your suspension. The bridges look like relics from civilization long gone. And it's not just the cracks in the sidewalk, it's the cracks in the soul. Schools are underfunded, teachers underpaid, colleges cost the price of a house, and the house itself costs the price of a lifetime of indentured servitude. And jobs don't feel like careers anymore. They're just endless gigs strung together with side hustles, all while wages stagnate and debt climbs like mold up the walls. Are we having fun yet? And meanwhile, relationships erode, marriage and birth rates are in decline, loneliness is rampant, and people are turning to AI companions to fill the void. Kids are raised by smartphones, and adults soothe themselves with pills or booze or, the glowing slot machine in their pockets we call a phone these days. And it seems that mental illness is less a medical problem now and more like a traumatic cultural collective unconscious. We've got the climate alternating between droughts, floods, fire, and increasingly unpredictable storms. Well, insurance companies, they just quietly tiptoe out of entire states because of course they do. And as the planet reshapes itself, the country can't even agree on whether it's happening, or if it is, whether it's the planet's fault for being too sensitive. So this is collapse. It's not really a single cataclysmic event. It's more like 1,000 hairline fractures spreading across daily life. It's a death, not with a bang, but with a groan of disgust, a shrug, plenty of denial, and a prescription refill. Everyone's exhausted. Nearly everyone is broke and in some kind of debt. And everyone's supposed to just smile about it because toxic positivity gaslights us into doing so. And these are the omens. It's not a dramatic scene of fire raining from the sky, and it's not exactly barbarians at the gates. It's just a slow decay, eaten from the inside out. The empire, it isn't going to explode. It's going to deflate. Probably quietly, but awkwardly, like a balloon at a kid's birthday party. And when it finally gives out, those in denial will be shocked, but others won't be surprised at all. They'll just shrug and say, well, we saw it coming. So here's the funny thing about democracy in the US. It's mostly a suggestion box. You can drop your little paper in there every 4 years, but the people in charge, they're not actually reading it. They're too busy cashing checks from lobbyists. Noam Chomsky broke this down perfectly in Requiem for the American Dream. He called it the concentration of wealth and power. Basically, the rich write the rules, and the rest of us just get to cosplay as citizens. And you're told your voice matters, but it matters in the same way clapping at the end of a Marvel movie matters. Nobody at Disney is changing the script because you clapped extra hard for Iron Man. And the whole thing is designed to look like it's working. I mean, we've got elections, debates, red versus blue, like a football game where the same corporation owns both teams. And you're supposed to pick a side, scream at your neighbors, and then ignore the fact that no matter who wins, Goldman Sachs keeps their skybox seats. So Chris Hedges called this the empire of illusion. He said the bread and circuses model never really went away. It just evolved and adapted over time. So Rome had gladiators, but we have reality TV. They had coliseums. We have NFL stadiums with corporate sponsors. The point is the same. Keep people entertained, distracted, and just comfortable enough not to revolt. But the catch is that empires rot from the inside when the illusion wears thin. And when people realize no matter how many hours they work and they can't afford rent, when healthcare is a scam, higher education is debt bondage, and wages have been flat since the 70s, but billionaires are flying their pets on private jets, that's when the magic trick falls apart. And we're right there, squinting at the stage, starting to notice the wires holding the rabbit out of the hat. Now, the truth is, the U.S. is not really a democracy. It's more like an oligarchy in a democracy costume. It's Halloween every day, except the only ones trick-or-treating are oil executives and defense contractors. Oh, and let's not forget the pharmaceutical industry. And they're the ones walking away with all the candy while you're left holding an empty pillowcase wondering why you even bothered. All right, so empires don't just fall because the bridges collapse or the aqueducts dry up. They fall when people stop being able to tell the difference between reality and entertainment. And let's face it, the US has practically built an entire economy on not knowing the difference. Now, Kurt Andersen nailed this in his book, Fantasyland. His argument is that the US has always had a soft spot for delusion. Puritans chasing visions, snake oil salesmen hawking miracle tonics, and nowadays we have influencers selling you things like NFTs of cartoon apes that were supposed to make you rich. The difference now is scale. We've built multi-billion-dollar industries out of unreality. We worship celebrities we'll never meet, and we buy products we don't need, and we swallow conspiracy theories because that's what happens when people can no longer agree upon what's real and what isn't. I think Chris Hedges put it more bluntly in Empire of Illusion. We are a culture addicted to spectacle. Rome had gladiators, we have billionaires slap fighting on Twitter. They had bread and circuses, we've got Disney adults in full costume screaming at cast members because the magic didn't feel authentic enough. And honestly, it makes sense. If the empire is collapsing around you, distraction is cheaper than dignity. The Romans got free grain and blood sports. We get streaming services and vape pens and Domino promising you a new crust innovation on a regular basis. Different shape, but same indigestion. So the problem is that when fantasy becomes the default setting, people lose their ability to confront reality. And we live in a country where the climate collapse is happening in real time, but half the population thinks it's a hoax, and the other half is too busy binge watching apocalypse content on Netflix to do anything about it. And the irony is that we are romanticizing collapse before it's even fully here. It's like watching a horror movie while the house is actually on fire. And underneath the spectacle, there's this quiet despair. Now, sociologists call this deaths of despair. Suicides, overdoses, alcoholism, addiction. People numbing themselves because reality has become too raw, meaningless, and frankly, just too unbearable. Nonetheless, the empire doesn't mind, and it doesn't care if you're distracted by TikTok or if you're invisible to society, as long as you keep feeding the machine until you're empty, until you're used up. So this is where we are now. We are a society anesthetized by fantasy, collapsing in real time, but watching it on screens as if it's entertainment, which I guess it is. But the fall of the U.S. empire, it isn't going to look like Rome burning while Nero played a lyre. It's going to look more like an unboxing video on YouTube that cuts to black halfway through. Now, the thing about empires is they all think they're special. The United States swears it's the exception. Because, you know, U.S. exceptionalism. But, of course, Rome thought that too. And the British thought the sun would never set on their empire. But now, the only place it doesn't set is a pub at midnight with a bartender yelling, "Last call." And the Soviets, well, they had a whole superpower image to maintain. You know, parades, missiles, astronauts, etc. And it all looked untouchable until one day it wasn't. The Berlin Wall, it didn't fall because of one speech. It fell because the cracks had been spreading for decades. And then one day, people just stopped pretending that it worked. And that's more or less how collapse happens. It's not overnight, and it's not with one dramatic explosion. It's a slow erosion until suddenly the structure can't hold itself up anymore. And honestly, it appears that the U.S. is right on schedule. You know, we've got the military overstretch of Rome, the financial hubris of the British, and we've got the political theater of the Soviet Union. Except our version comes with commercials and sponsored content. And it's kind of funny when you think about it, because Rome distracted with people with gladiators, but we've got influencers selling hair gummies. Yeah. Humans are a wild, weird lot. So the British Empire looted spices from half the planet. And in the US, we have Taco Bell serving you a Doritos Locos taco like it's a cultural innovation. The Soviet Union had propaganda, but we've got Fox News and MSNBC doing the same thing, just with fancier lighting and angrier graphics, I guess. So the echoes are all there, and you can see them if you squint hard enough. Bread and circuses, overreach and arrogance. A ruling class that's convinced it's untouchable. A working class that's exhausted but still told they should be grateful. And we have a culture that's so wrapped up in its own mythology, it can't even imagine the story ending any other way. And throughout history, every empire believed it was different and impervious. I mean, the US thinks Netflix and nuclear weapons will somehow keep it afloat forever. But that's kind of the punchline. Collapse doesn't care about your confidence, and it doesn't care about your slogans or your flags or your GDP charts. Collapse just shows up quietly and then all at once. And when it does, people will act shocked and they'll say, how could this happen here? In the United States of America? The same way the Romans probably said, how could this happen in Rome? We were civilized. We had aqueducts. But the truth is, no empire sees its own reflection until it's too late. So I think the strangest thing about living in a collapsing empire is how normal it feels. You'd think it would be utter chaos, fire in the streets, the military on every corner. But most of the time, it's just people going to work, buying lattes, posting memes about how broke they are. And collapse doesn't feel like an action movie. It feels like waiting at the DMV. Endless, boring decay. Now there's a term for this called hypernormalization. And the Soviet Union went through this towards the end of the 1980s. I did a video on hypernormalization, which you can find here on the channel if you're interested. Now, apparently, denial is just easier. It's easier to scroll on your phone and just binge another season and convince yourself that somebody smarter is handling it. Somebody somewhere has all this under control, right? Because if you really stop to face it, if you looked the collapse like straight in the eyes, it would probably crush you. Alan Watts once said that part of the problem is people take life too seriously, as if death were some kind of mistake. That's denial in a nutshell. Pretending we're immortal and that empires are immortal, pretending your landlord raising your rent 40% is just inflation and not a sign that the system is eating itself alive. But denial has a cost, and that's where you get conspiracy theories. People grasping at any story that makes all the chaos make sense. So hypernormalization makes it easier to believe lizard people are in charge, rather than accept that no one's in charge, and the ship is just drifting aimlessly. And we're all numbing ourselves in various ways to various degrees, some of us to the point of deaths of despair. This isn't an accident. It's ultimately people opting out of a game that feels hopelessly rigged. You can barely pay rent. You can't afford health insurance. You can't find meaning anywhere in your life, so you find escape. Whether it's in a bottle, a pill, a needle, and more often than anything else, a screen. Whatever. Collapse is quiet. It's personal. Collapse is millions of people slowly giving up in one way or another. And then there are the optimists, the ones who say, well, we'll innovate our way out of all this. Well, maybe. Just like Rome thought they could invent their way out of the barbarian invasions, or like the Soviets who thought they could 5-year plan themselves into paradise. The US thinks it's going to beat collapse with an app. Download the new Empire 2.0 update, now with 20% less poverty. The truth is, denial feels good until it doesn't. It feels like safety until the roof finally caves in. And by the time you stop pretending, it's just too late. Well, I think the only way out is through. Now, here's the thing about collapse. It's rarely a single epic and horrific event. It's not like in the movies where everyone screams at the sky the sky is turning red or whatever, most of the time it's just weird, calmly weird. Like the moment your fridge stops working and you realize you've been eating expired yogurt for a week and somehow survived. So after the Empire stops pretending it's invincible, life doesn't end. It just mutates. For example, downtowns that used to have empty storefronts, they're now empty storefronts with a community garden in the front. Empty parking lots become unofficial skate parks. Social media echo chambers, well, they're still there, but people start using them to organize neighbors for mutual aid instead of arguments about politicians and sports ball. A collapse doesn't erase humanity. It just forces us to find the cracks and live in them. And it teaches us to improvise. Now, in some tiny, scattered ways, I think the U.S. is already starting to look like this. Multi-generational households aren't some sad statistic anymore. They're actually people rediscovering how to rely on each other. So, in addition to those things, I think, the near future might look something like this. Side hustles aren't just for extra cash. They're teaching skills that no corporation is ever going to pay you to learn. Water systems failing. Community wells and rain barrels suddenly feel like innovation. I think we start seeing creativity and resilience sprout in the least glamorous places. Gradually, maybe people start taking matters into their own hands. Growing food, living off grid in various capacities, doing even small things in the community like do-it-yourself pothole repair. It's absurd, of course, because the empire was supposed to promise progress and eternal prosperity. But now, it's a half-empty Walmart parking lot with a guy selling kombucha on the hood of his car. The U.S. may still exist on maps, but on the ground it looks like a civilization trying to remember how to survive without corporate HR and billion-dollar ad campaigns or reality TV governors. And yes, there's grief and pain. People mourn the world that was, the faux stability, the promises, all the illusions. But I think in the middle of that grief, there's also this strange sense of liberation. And it's terrifying, but oddly hopeful. So, without the empire constantly whispering in your ear that you need to be richer, thinner, faster, younger, more productive, and so forth, I think you get to actually breathe, finally. Maybe you get to reimagine what life could be, even in miniature abstract ways. Now, don't get me wrong. I think collapse, it's chaotic and painful and undoubtedly confusing, but it's also a weird kind of opportunity. At least that's the way I see it currently. I think the trick is in noticing it before you're buried under the bills, the misinformation, the debt, and the despair. And look, collapse isn't a finish line. It's a landscape. And right now, I think the U.S. is just starting to show these small glimpses of the first blurry sketches of that new, awkward, unpolished map. Okay. So what do you actually do when the empire you've been raised to worship is quietly rotting around you? Well, the first thing I'd suggest is take a breath. No, seriously, you're going to need some oxygen. The collapse itself isn't really up for debate, but how you respond to it is. The first thing is just admitting how absurd it all is. The U.S. isn't suddenly going to morph into Switzerland with better pizza. It's not going to clean itself up and start running smoothly. It's going to be messy and ridiculous, sometimes hilarious in the darkest of ways, and sometimes it's going to be horrifying. And the sooner you embrace radical acceptance, the lighter it all feels. You stop wasting energy fighting the tide and you start learning how to swim sideways. Then there's the question of what you can actually control. You're not going to fix Congress or the IRS or the stock market, but you can cook your own meals, learn how to grow food, and maybe learn to fix your own sink. It's a start. You can learn a skill that might actually matter in a post-collapse world. I think those small, stubborn acts of self-sufficiency are little rebellions. They keep you sane and they make you feel less like you're chained to a dying machine. And I think they can lead to bigger changes down the road. I mean, we got to start somewhere. Now, as much as everyone hates to hear this, community matters. Institutions are already failing, and they're only going to get worse. Governments, corporations, social services, none of them are really reliable anymore. So you're left with people. You know, family, friends, neighbors, weird little co-ops, multi-generational households. It's not romantic. It's survival with a little humanity mixed in. And yeah, it's messy and awkward and usually annoying, but it's still better than going it completely alone. And look, I say this as a loner myself. Another thing, try to stay awake, but don't burn yourself out. Collapse awareness, it can definitely be exhausting. And I think between conspiracy rabbit holes and media noise and all the economic stress, it's like drinking from a fire hose aimed directly at your brain. So pick your battles, read some Chomsky or Hedges if that helps you vent and think straighter, but also read up on how to build self-sufficiency as an individual and within a community. And look, don't forget the simple things like watching a sunset and laugh at how idiotic and amazing all of this is. Write something. Embrace simple pleasures. And I always say, humor is a kind of resistance. I like mine. I take mine dry and dark. Thank you very much. And while you're at it, keep questioning everything, including these so-called solutions, because empires collapse when they stop questioning themselves. We shouldn't fall into the same trap. Ask why things are the way they are. Challenge assumptions. Be brutally honest with yourself. Exercise critical thinking. Try a little radical honesty, even though it may be scary. And maybe share what you figured out with someone who isn't a total idiot. Ideally, someone who can also laugh at a joke about a crumbling bridge or whatever. Now look, I don't have all the answers or any definitive answers really. I'm just a cog here like everyone else. I'm just doing my best under the circumstances. So I think in the end, it really comes down to this. Embrace impermanence and learn to live in the present moment. As cliche as it sounds, nothing lasts forever, not even the United States as we know it. And yeah, that may sound grim, but I think it's also freeing. I think you get to define meaning for yourself instead of waiting for a broken system to hand you one. And you get to carve out something akin to purpose in the middle of collapse. And sure, it's chaotic and ridiculous. It's heartbreaking. But it's also completely, terrifyingly alive. I don't think collapse has to be a horror story. I think it can also be a stage for honesty and creativity and ultimately connection. And if nothing else, at the very least, it gives you some incredible material for stories. So this is it. The U.S. is limping along, dressed up in its corporate Halloween costume, pretending everything is fine while the potholes get deeper and the student loans pile higher and, you know, the politicians carry on with their bad acting performance. And maybe all that sounds terrifying, and it is, but the absurdity is almost comforting in a way. The empire doesn't have a master plan, and the sky isn't going to fall like in a movie trailer. It's just crumbling piece by piece, with all of us caught somewhere in the mess, trying to figure out which pieces are ours to hold on to and which ones we should take with a grain of salt. So the good news is you get to pick your part. You can focus on the little things that matter: community, creativity, resilience, humor. You can refuse to be distracted by the manufactured spectacle. And you can be honest with yourself about what's broken and what you can actually do about it, if anything. And yes, it's grimy, it's grim, and it's hilarious sometimes in that can't believe this is real way. But that's life inside a crumbling empire. You keep breathing, you keep thinking, and maybe you find some dignity in all the insanity. And what else is there? So, when someone asks you if the U.S. is collapsing, you can shrug, pour yourself a drink, and say, yeah, but at least the Wi-Fi still works, mostly, for now. Because collapse is inevitable. But I think perspective and a little gallows humor can make it survivable.
After carefully listening to the brother speak, here's my deep critical analysis. So we are going to use a touch of deconstruction and critical analysis to dissect this video. You see, deconstruction means that we take apart the big words and the big promises, and we look at what they really mean in practice. Because one thing I do believe and one thing I understand is that every communication that we speak, every communication we take, right, or every communication we pass always has multiple interpretation, right? So contextualizing a communication helps to eliminate the ambiguous nature of human language or of communication. So deconstruction is really important in making us understand so. So this also means that we are not going only to listen to what America says about itself, but we are also going to look at what it does in the darkness, what it does hidden in silence as well, right? The contradictions and also the actions that do not match the words that America prophesy or rather put other countries to do, right? Because we know America as a country that really forces other countries to do a particular thing. And if they don't, they are punished by a common whip, right? The American whip is called a sanction. So America is just, according to the gentleman, a hypocritical country. So I'm also going to connect the video's message to the life of Black Americans today. Because when an empire falls, the people who suffer most are always the ones who are already at the bottom. There's no one at the bottom of America, if not the blacks. And I'm not saying this, I'm saying this in an educational way. In America, that is often black people who are at the bottom. And when we think about Trumpism, we also see how the politics of fear, of anger and revenge makes this collapse sharper, more painful, and more dangerous, right? So according to the brother, there is what we call the promise and the reality. The promise does not match the reality. The brother is asking, or rather the brother is claiming America is collapsing. But to understand this, we first must ask, what was America's promise? America said what? America said it was the land of freedom. That was the promise. It said that it was the land of democracy. That was the promise. It also promised to be the land of equality. America told the world that anyone could succeed if they followed the work hard formula. But does it really work? You see, from the beginning, the same country that spoke freedom allowed slavery. The same land that spoke of equality built laws to separate whites from blacks. Even when slavery ended, Jim Crow rose. When Jim Crow ended, mass incarceration came. The language of equality was always in conflict with the reality of oppression. For Black Americans, the American dream has always been a dream that feels far away, like a star you can see but can never touch. You see, the title itself has an ending, which says end of an empire, which basically means that this contradiction between promise and reality has grown too big. So, let's try and look at America as an empire of machine, right? See, the gentleman in the video explains that America behaves like an empire. Empire takes from others to grow their own. They use war, control, and exploitation. They live beyond their means, always borrowing from the future to pay for today. Deconstructing this idea shows that the machine shows us the machine under the surface, which is America. America says it fights wars for freedom, but if we break apart the words, we see it fights wars for oil, for power, for markets. America says it is a democracy, but if we look closely enough, money decides election in America, not the ordinary voter. For black Americans, the machine has always been a prison. The same empire that bombs abroad also polices, the same empire that bombs abroad also polices and surveils back home. The weapons made for foreign wars find their way into city streets, pointed at young black men, right? So the same weapons which are meant to work outside are working inside, but against a specific community, which is the black community. The economic greed of America that empties factories and sends jobs overseas leaves black communities without work, without schools, and without hope. Trumpism has made this machine louder and more open. Trump said out loud what many leaders keep quiet. He shouted about walls, bans, and enemies. He turned fear into a campaign. You see, when an empire starts to speak only in danger and division, its roots are very weak. So here are the three signs of a country collapsing, as said by the video, or rather as told by the brother in the video. The first one, we have economic decay. The second is political division. The third is endless wars. And the fourth is moral hypocrisy. So let's try and look at the first one, economic decay. Yeah? America is rich, no doubt, but millions are poor. The rich grow richer, while the workers cannot pay rent. For instance, black Americans are always on the grinding side, right? Grinding, making money for the system. But they themselves cannot get, most of black Americans cannot get a way through. So this means that generations of black Americans are trapped in poverty, even while Wall Street celebrates success. The second sign of collapse is political division. America says it is one nation under God, but in truth it is split by hate. Trumpism shows us halfway the country believes in one set of facts and the other believes in another. For black people, the division is dangerous because it brings black people open racism, voter suppression, and white militias. And the third one, we have endless wars as a sign of economic or an empire collapse. The empire keeps fighting wars abroad, but it cannot build safe schools at home. The money goes to bombs, not to books. For black children, this means underfunded schools, no opportunities, and a prison waiting at the end of the road. The fourth sign of economic collapse is moral hypocrisy. America preaches about human rights to the world, but inside its own borders, police killings of black people continue. The construction, or rather this analysis, shows us the lie: freedom for some and fear for others. So the brother in this video explains that all empires fall this way. Rome fell, Britain fell, and now America is following the same path. So the fourth part of this analysis is we need to understand that for black Americans, the collapse does not like the future. It feels like the present. So the collapse does not feel like the future. No, it's happening now. See, many black families already live in what looks like decline. Poor neighborhoods, broken health system, unsafe policing. The empire may still stand tall for white suburbs, but not for black America. The storm is here already. Deconstruction teaches us to listen not only to words, but to silences. The silence of fear of America is clear. When banks collapsed in 2008, The government saved the banks, not the black homeowners who lost everything. When COVID-19 came, the hospitals filled with black patients, but the news spoke only of the economy. The silence says black lives are not the priority in America. See, Trumpism has made this clear. The speeches that Trump makes do not hide racism at all. His policies target immigrants, Muslims, and black voters. He told white America that they were victims even while they were held, or rather they were holding power. This twisting of reality is a sign of collapse. When lies replace truth, the empire foundation breaks, right? You see, another thing to add is that when America says, "Make America great again," the slogan with the Republicans, this analysis, or rather I ask this question, great for who? For black slaves? For sharecroppers? Or for the people of Ferguson or Flint, right? When a politician speaks of law and order, what do I ask as an African? Or rather as a black person? Whose law? Whose order? For black Americans, order often means surveillance, arrest, and prison. When the empire says it's collapsing because of foreign threats, the construction shows us the truth. The threat is inside, in inequality, in greed, and in racism, right? We can see that towards the end of the video, it said that the empires fall, but people can survive if they see the truth and prepare. For black Americans, the lesson is heavy. Do not wait for the empire to save you. It has never saved you before. Why would it now? Build strong roots in community, in culture, in memory, and in resistance. Trumpism is not only about one man. It is a movement, a system of collapse. When people feel fear, they turn to strong men. But strong men cannot stop the storm. They only make the storm worse. For black Americans, survival means knowing that collapse is not the end. It can also be a beginning. A rotten tree must fall before new seeds can grow. The empire may end, but the people can still rise, right? So going back to the proverb, the Indian proverb, when the roots are deep, there is no reason to fear the wind. But America's roots were never deep in justice, never ever. They were planted in slavery, watered with segregation, and fertilized with inequality, right? So this video entitled The United States of America, or the United States of Collapse, the End of Empire, tells us that the storm has come. Through this analysis, my deconstruction, we see the truth. The promises and the realities do not match. The empire is shaking. For black Americans, this is not only a story of tomorrow, but a story of today. Trumpism is both a cause and a sign of collapse, a mirror showing the empire's weakness. And yet, in the ruins of empires, there can be new growth. If black America builds strong roots in truth and in solidarity, in struggle, then the new wind might not destroy them. The fall of empire could be the rise of something new, more just and more real. Yeah. Guys, this is EFK Original Documentaries. If you like what I do, subscribe. Support me on Patreon. You can give something that your heart calls you to do. I'll still really appreciate. Thank you for people who have already supported me. I really appreciate for your support. Yeah. Thank you so much and see you in the next one.